It just makes me so sad with the history of mental health and what we've done to women, especially in the lobotomies and the hospitalizations. So it makes me think about how are we going to look back on how we've treated people with schizophrenia?
Right.
Because what you're describing, some people might say, well, Lisa, you had schizophrenia as a child.
You know what? And let's bring in religious connotation with that, culture with that is the Bible says that I'm a soothsayer. Well, I'm anything but that. So you follow me like that, or I am, but not in the frame that it was described. I don't know. But we're taught in our cultures that this is wrong. And yet I was born this way.
Hi, welcome to another episode of the Mental Health Break podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Nafisa Sekandari. I have something exciting to share with you. Over the past several months, I've been developing a brand new 10-week coaching program designed to help women break free from chronic stress, anxiety, overwhelm, and emotional exhaustion by addressing the root causes and not just the symptoms. If you've been struggling with anxiety, feeling stuck and constantly overwhelmed, or finding yourself trapped in cycles of worry and stress, I invite you to schedule a free consultation call to see if you're a good fit for the program. You can learn more and apply by visiting drsekandari.com. I would love the opportunity to support you on your journey towards greater peace, confidence, and emotional well-being. Today, I'll be speaking with an epigenetic specialist who will tell us the ancestral history behind our limiting beliefs about finances. Let me briefly introduce her before I bring her on. Lisa Thomas is a global epigenetics thought leader, impact catalyst, TEDx speaker, international mentor, and keynote speaker and the founder of Epigenetics for Global Impact. Her work sits at the intersection of cutting-edge epigenetic science and deep energetic healing. Through her proprietary soul awakening method, Lisa helps high-achieving individuals trace the fears, patterns, and belief systems running beneath their success, many of which began not with them, but with the generations who came before them. Hi, Lisa. Thank you for joining us on the show today.
Oh, I'm excited to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
I'm so glad to talk to you. Epigenetics interests me so much. I remember reading the book, The Biology of Belief by Dr. Bruce Lipton, and it completely opened up my mind in ways I couldn't even, I didn't even know such a thing existed. And when I heard you speak about it, I was like, I want to learn more from her. So I wanted to speak to you. So can you tell us a little bit about what is it that you do and who do you serve? And then we can get into what epigenetics is.
They kind of all go together. All right. So epigenetics in the realm of what I specialize in is the science of and our emotions and our trauma and our behavior of those that came before us. And so that is based on our ancestors' lives and how we inherit that. And for me, it's around serving those that want to experience more of who they are, remember who they are, be less complicated in their life, and people that keep hitting the same ceiling or the same barriers, that same wall. Because most often what I've found is those patterns started long before them.
That's so interesting that our ancestors can impact our lives today. And
right.
I know that there are root causes to mental health issues, like anxiety is highly genetic. It gets passed on. Mm-hmm. Obviously, our hair color, eye color, skin color. We know about all of that. But to have our limiting beliefs, our traumas, our just things that are standing in in the way of our lives, as far as limiting beliefs, overthinking, anxiety, depression, all of that can be passed on from grandparents, great-grandparents.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely, they can. And we're not, unless there's been conversations growing up around the dinner table, our mom saying, hey, you're just like my grandma, or where there's an awareness brought to our attention, we don't know these things. They're not in our conscious mind. They live within us subconsciously on a cellular level. And let's just talk about along with mental health comes addiction, because oftentimes people are soothing themselves through alcohol, through drugs to quiet their mind, for different things. So let's say three siblings all inherit addiction. So it might be the addiction to alcohol, and there's what's called in the science of epigenetics the informational tag. Informational tags we all get, but not all informational tags, first of all, get turned on, or second of all, when they get turned on, present the same way. So if all three siblings inherit addiction, one might be from great-grandfather's alcoholism that really wasn't talked about anyway, right? It's something they just lived with. And so it might be that sibling, it becomes addicted to alcohol because of the choices they make. The second one, meaning they drink alcohol. The second child could inherit the same thing, and the informational tag doesn't ever get turned on. But let's say it does. It could be that they have seen the pattern, and so they're like, I'm never going to drink alcohol. But the addiction could be the addiction to perfectionism. All right. When the third one, it could get the informational tag of addiction could be turned on, but it's the addiction to controlling. And how many people, I mean, I know so many people, and even in my own life where I've had this issue with control, because you see, it serves us to control because then we have this belief that bad things won't happen. So all three siblings could inherit the same thing. It doesn't mean it will present itself as the exact same thing, or it could be.
Definitely, especially since I specialize in anxiety-based disorders and it runs in my family and everybody shows up with it differently. Like I thought I dodged the bullet because I didn't look like the other people, and I was like, oh, I don't have it. Yeah. But I do. It just shows up differently. And it took me a while to figure that out, that what I was struggling with was my mindset and the overthinking, the catastrophization, the irrational thoughts and beliefs. I had no idea. But it's really easy to see the connection to, like, my grandfather had it, and it's like people knew about it. And so it's easy to say, oh, okay, I'm just like him.
Yeah.
But one thing you mentioned is some people never talk about these dirty family secrets. They keep it, and then all of a sudden you're like, I don't know where this came from.
Exactly. It catches us by surprise. And there is that shame factor, especially with mental health, that for generations it was shameful. And so that individual in the family that struggled or had bad anxiety or was the hermit, right, claustrophobic, and they would stay indoors, they lived in the barn. There was a room in the, or they lived in the back of the house. And you could go a whole lifetime in a neighborhood and not know that somebody else lived in that house. Because that's just how it was. You didn't talk about it because somehow that made it, it was bad. It was embarrassing. It was humiliating. It's shameful. And so it wasn't discussed. Mm-hmm.
It's so sad how mental illness used to be treated in the past. And the reason I talk about it so much and I want to normalize it, we need to talk about it like we do with getting a cold or
eyesight or diabetes or anything like that, because it's so treatable now.
Yeah. And there are natural solutions to it. You don't need to be dependent on a mental health professional or medical doctor or medication. There are ways, and that's why I'm so passionate about educating. One thing that I did for my doctorate dissertation is I did some research on the Holocaust survivors. And what fascinated me was how a lot of the Holocaust survivors went into the culture of silence. Like they never talked about what they saw because they didn't want to pass it on to their family members or traumatize them. And yet their great-grandkids or their grandkids ended up having symptoms as if they did experience trauma, even though there is no history of trauma with them.
That's right. So, that's right. It's very much, and I've worked with Holocaust survivors, or not them specifically, but them, their kids, okay? And they have that trauma. I found it. You know what else in that? Yerkes University did a study with just 9/11 survivors of those women who were pregnant, okay? And what they found is that, their first generation, next generation had high anxiety. For no reason in their life should they have this anxiety. And it was because of what they inherited, because of what their mothers went through.
Yeah.
Yeah, they've done. I love studies that prove this, right? They give the conversation for those in the audience that are high knowledge, that they need to see it to believe it, so to speak. They need to hear it because now science has caught up with it. And I'm so grateful for that. When I first started my work, there was no science.
And it explains so much. And that's why I think just learning about epigenetics really gives me hope, is that, a lot of people in my culture and the countries that I come from Afghanistan. It has a long history of war and trauma.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the other countries, especially a lot of the Middle Eastern countries, they all experience a lot of OCD, a lot of anxiety, and they blame themselves. There's a lot of shame around it, when really your family and your great grandparents have been struggling with this, and it's just genetically getting passed on. But there are things that we can do. Like, what's really interesting to me is that, we can't stop the genetic transfer of the DNA to get to be
right
down to the future generations. But what is it that we can do to change that? Are we just doomed to inherit our ancestors' trauma and just live with it and pass it on to our future generation, or can we stop it?
When we heal, it heals those before us and it heals those that come after us. So when we take that opportunity to heal what we've inherited. Now, let me pause here for a second, because we inherit many good things. This isn't ancestor blaming. We inherit resilience. We inherit our gift of charisma. We inherit our writing gifts. We inherit so many good things. And in addition to that, we inherit life experiences. So it's the science of epigenetics. It's going to happen anyway, but it's not anybody's fault. And when you do heal, and this is what I call the tender mercy of the universe, or the tender mercy of God, is that when it releases it from us, it releases it from those that it came before that suffered it. And it releases from, because it's within us. If we are then, let's say we have children that are alive, it automatically releases from all those that have inherited it.
Wow. That's amazing. Yeah. That's so interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And this is all, it connects to energy healing, doesn't it?
It does. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I
work with a lot of business owners that really want to go to the next level. They want to make a difference in people's lives, and they keep hitting their own belief system, their own patterns that they come up against, because this isn't mind over matter. We cannot do enough mindset work. It's so hard to explain that in a sense, because we're wired to do better. We're wired to improve. But when we do that, what if it doesn't, right? Then we blame ourselves. And this isn't about blaming anybody, including ourselves. It's around the subconscious getting on board with letting go of how it's wired, of what it inherited, of what it believes is who we are. And it will, when it realizes it's not serving us, it will let go of it.
But I like what you said, in that it's not that we only inherit the negative or the trauma from our ancestors. We also inherit the lessons that they learned, the resiliency that they had to come up with to survive in their survival story. And that's also inside of us, and we need to tap into that as well.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. I did a TEDx talk on it, really trying to explain that we inherit good things too, as well as the negative impact.
Yeah, I used to joke that I only inherited all the bad qualities from my parents, because I was I was just only focused on the anxiety and the stress and the shyness or whatever. And then I realized, no, I've also inherited all the good as well.
You have. And it makes you, that's right. Your gift of communication, your ability to pull out of those people that work with you, like the thread, right? That's a gift you have. Yes, it comes from education, but education develops our gifts, right? And you inherited that ability from somebody before you.
It's really interesting, because I'm so into holistic medicine, herbs, essential oils, homeopathic medicine. And I'm thinking these are all new things that I'm just interested in the United States. Little did I know that my grandmother was doing this stuff back in Afghanistan. She was the local herbalist, and my uncle studied homeopathic medicine in Germany. Yeah. And I had no idea that these people were doing these things.
That's so cool. Isn't that fun to have that awareness that, oh my gosh, this is who I am, And so did somebody else have that interest, and maybe they're helping awaken that in me. See, I think our ancestors are very much a part of our life. We made commitments to each other that we would support each other during our time, their time, and our success is very relevant, meaning our happiness, our ability to experience joy, and us feel like we're living into what we came here to be and do is important to them as well.
I like that some cultures really value ancestral knowledge, and then other people just, it's especially the modern day, it's all about the individual. It's all about who I am, and it's all about me, and really not giving credit. Huh?
Yeah, it's not working so well.
No.
The me is not working. No.
We need to tap into the collective wisdom and the knowledge. If we're lucky enough to have our grandparents that are alive, sit with them, learn from them, ask them questions. And if not, ask your parents or ask somebody else, what were they like? Because we can learn so much about ourselves just by knowing them.
Yeah. And it makes me think of a client that I've had who got interested because of this, got interested in Ancestry.com. I think that's the name of the program. And she has gone and done all this work to figure out who she is, who she related to. And so, for example, she was really struggling with a stomach issue. And it went back like 8 generations around starvation. And we identified this woman 8 generations back, which started this to her to go figure it out. Now, it doesn't always happen this way, but you know something. She found this particular individual, royalty in the UK, in Europe, and she had been walled up in a dungeon and starved. So it's like so fascinating, the journey, understanding who we are and where it can take us. Like, who would have known that? And most people don't take the time to try and figure that out, but she did. And it's created a hobby for her that she never knew she was going to love this much. Mm-hmm.
Wow. I was watching one of those shows on PBS where they were looking at ancestry. Who are you? I think it was like,
Yeah.
Who are you? And this one actor, he named one of his children Paris, and another one, it's like very connected to France. And he's like, I'm African American. I have no connection. Like, he thought he had no connection to France.
Yeah.
When they did that ancestry, just to where he's from, he definitely had a strong connection to Paris.
Wow.
Or to France, and he had no idea. And this is why I wanted to have this conversation, is that we often feel we're just floating around all by ourselves, and it's just our mom and dad, and that's all that matters. But there's such a link that connects us. And the more we know who we are, where we come from, no matter who we are, whether our parents, great grandparents were slaves or servants or royalty, it doesn't matter. It really gives us insight into who they were.
And when we have insight to who they were, we have better insight into who we are. And when you think about it, yes, we have inherited patterns, then we have our childhood experiences, lifetime experiences, and then we spend our adulthood trying to unwind it all and figure out why we are the way we are, and why do we keep repeating the same things? Why do we think we've worked on something, but it shows up again in those triggers? And I think understanding that some of these things are in our chemistry of how we're wired is very helpful, because we can't make ourselves bad enough to change. It doesn't work.
What do you mean by that, the bad enough to change? Can you explain that a little bit?
When we're critical of ourselves, when we judge ourselves, when we say we should know better, we should have, could have done it differently. And many people show up that way. I've showed up that way. Like, Lisa, you know better. Why do you keep doing this? And then there's the angry voice in us that says, stop it. But in the angry voice, that doesn't create lasting change.
You're right. We have this, it's almost acceptable that when we're mean to ourselves, that's supposed to be good. But when we look at a child that's trying to learn something new, they're not going to learn faster by us calling them names and saying, you're so stupid. Why are you so slow?
The angrier we get at a child, the more resolved they are that way. It only anchors that negative thought into them.
we need to learn from that and learn to speak nicer to ourselves, because our body is also listening. It doesn't matter where that voice is coming from, whether it's from us or from the outside source.
That's really a good point, Doctor. It's spot on. Our bodies are always listening, and our bodies are an instrument. Our bodies are wired to heal. They really are.
It really is. And it creates and tries to, constantly trying to find balance and try to find that the healthy side of us, mentally, physically, and emotionally. But it's the chatter that gets in our way and we self-sabotage, right? But a lot of that chatter comes from programming. It might be coming from generations, but it also comes from programming we heard at the age of 5 or 7. And we continue to operate under that programming, which is just so amazing to me.
We do. It takes a lifetime to undo our childhood. You're right. And I believe some things anchor stronger within us in childhood because they were inherited first. And so when it happens, it like turns that informational tag on saying, yep, this is who you are. Yep, validating this is who you are. When it's really not.
Interesting. Yeah. What got you into studying this or learning more about epigenetics?
Yeah, that's a good question. One thing led to another. And I was born just, kind of like no fault of my own, born with spiritual gifts that I'll tell you what that looked like as a child. It looked like having spirits wake me up to want to go tell a neighbor something because they understood that I could hear them or see them. And that's really complicated. That's complicated for a child. And I lived in a lot of fear as a little girl. It's not what the movies make it out to be. It's just that the nervous system reacts to never having downtimes, in a sense. Spirits don't look like they do in The Sixth Sense and things like that. But what would happen then is my mother, wanting to protect me and help me, would say, now, Lisa, don't tell anybody. Don't tell anybody. Don't tell your friends that their make-believe friends are real. Don't share that. Because if you do, their parents aren't going to let you play with them. So I'm not saying my mother should have told me different. My mother, in the era I grew up in, was protecting me and kept me safe. Then as time went on in my life, while it continued to happen, it didn't, like, what do I say? I just learned to squash it. I just learned to suppress it. Like, it's just this annoying thing out here that pesters me, so to speak. Then as I started having children, I experienced postpartum depression. But I didn't know what that was. I was not educated in that form of mental health. And I didn't know that it existed in my family bloodline either, because I came from the family that you didn't talk about those things. My father his father was a Quaker. His parents were Quakers. And Quakers have a belief, they bury their dead without a tombstone or marked tombstone because God knows where they are. And that if you don't share anything unless there's a direct reason or direct question to know something. So I wouldn't have thought to ask. And so I was never told. And then I had a near-death experience when I was 40. And I was given a choice whether I could stay or go. Now, during that depressed time, I would say, God, I think you got it wrong. And if something happens, if my heart stops, it's okay. I wasn't suicidal. There's a difference. But I also was okay not staying. And I was given a choice if I was going to stay or go. I was in a bad ATV accident in Cabo. And as I was leaving my body, I hear, are you staying or are you going? And I go through this, my brain connects very quickly. And I'm like, well, I wouldn't, if I'm being asked, then it's really not my time. Or you wouldn't ask me because when it's really your time, you go. And so I said, okay, I'll stay. But I kept drifting away from my body. And then it was like a thunder voice that said, Lisa, are you staying or are you going? And I said, I'm staying. And bam, 880 pounds land on me. The bike goes up through my jawbone, breaks my jaw. And I lay in bed for 6 weeks. And I made this, I said, look, you didn't show me what I was supposed to do. I feel my life's pretty hard right now. So this is the deal. I'm going to say yes to everything you bring me. I'm going to say yes to every opportunity. I'm going to say yes to every interest I have. And I'm going to trust that I'm not brought anything that isn't for me, at least for a while. And so that's what I did, doctor. I just started saying yes. I got into nutrition. I got into Bach remedies. I got into flower essence. And one thing led to another very, very quickly. And I realized that this gift that I had as a child was actually teaching me present tense, the reality of people's lives. So when I started seeing people, I started trying things out and experimenting out of a hobby. And that hobby then led to a business very quickly. In fact, I had to own it as a business so that it didn't deplete me. But I didn't understand that. I had to learn it through experience. So I'll give you a quick example of being mentored through the gift. Is I was working through with a client, a male client at the time. And now keep in mind, I didn't tell anybody I was clairvoyant, because you see that I was taught that was bad. And so I was helping people without telling them. And so, and I trademarked some form of muscle testing that I do that's very unique, because I want root cause. And I want to know I want the brain involved. I want the root subconscious involved. And so here I am working with this client. It was when I was seeing people in person. And the deceased father comes to the session and says, "Tell my son I'm sorry." And now there's a conflict in me, because the son doesn't know I know this. And the son is at the same time telling me that he hates his father for how he treated him, that he doesn't ever, good riddance that his father died. And yet I have his father in my living room saying, "Tell him I'm sorry, tell him I'm sorry." Finally, this internal battle within me is, I just turned to him and I said, "I realize this is going to be a shock, but your father is here and wants me to tell you that he's sorry." And this man breaks down in tears. Okay. I then begin to release feeling abandoned. And this vision opens up in front of me. I call it like a diorama. Okay. And I see this man as a little boy, because he's sobbing right now. He can't even talk. And I see him as a little boy, and he is crawling underneath his parents' bed. He heard his father drive up in the driveway. He is beelining for his parents' room. And as he crawls under, like it's a wood frame bed, as he's crawling under the bed, I see empty alcohol bottles that he's pushing through. He's moving to the side. And then he lays perfectly still as his father's calling him. Totally ignores his father, lays perfectly still under there. I instantly know his father was a raging alcoholic. I can help him see. Then I witness, as I'm clearing, as his body is releasing as a better way of the abandonment, of being bullied, of being picked on, of this angry energy, his father gets lighter. His father's soul starts to feel to me less burdened, but is recognizably lighter. Oh, when I clear from him, it clears from them. Now, what I was expecting is when this man left, that he would never come back, because I was taught as a child that they won't be your friend anymore if they know that this exists within me. And so the aha moment for me to really own it as a business from here on was, he turned to me as he walked out my front door and he said, "When can I come back?" We schedule an appointment. I closed the door, and I literally fell in tears. Like this aha moment in my life that I was accepted for who I am led me to realize that the gift that had been a curse in my life, because I used to pray that, like, it didn't make sense to me and it was a burden. So could you just take it away? And I really feel that when we suppress who we are, it turns to depression. I know that there's I know that there's clinical reasons that we get depressed, and there's things in our life that happen that are situational. But I also know from experience and clients' experiences since then that when we suppress who we really are and we play small because we have a fear of being who we are won't be accepted, depression happens, right?
I totally agree with that. Wow, what a story. And I am a firm believer in God prepares the called. And you've been being prepared since you were a child and you had no idea and you were fighting it every step of the way.
Yeah. Yeah. And so what was my struggle is now my passion.
When you say you see the Father, what does he look like in your living room?
Just like he did in real life. He looked just like he did. But we have different shades of the light we elude. And I didn't recognize that. I didn't recognize what that was as a child. I didn't understand. I understood that they carried burdens, but I didn't have words to what that meant. But we carry with us what's unresolved in this life. And then in our next, part of that transition into our next life is then we're working to undo what we didn't resolve in this life. And so it's much easier to resolve it now. If there's forgiveness that needs to happen, just do it. Like, don't overanalyze why they don't deserve forgiveness. Let it go from yourself, because it's a game changer. Because if not, it keeps spirits here earthbound because of unresolved hatred, unresolved unforgiveness. Mm-hmm.
And you're not making it okay for whatever they did when you forgive. You're just releasing the burden on yourself.
That's right. You're letting go of that anchor in you that holds you back, because it doesn't hold anybody else back.
It does. It impacts us. It's the same thing with all our emotions are fully charged. Yeah. And once we release them from us, then we release that charge that it's holding us down as well. And I think that's very hard to understand for some people.
It is. It's hard. And there can be inherited patterns of unforgiveness where it's modeled that a neighbor does something wrong, you hate them, no family talks till dying. Nobody talks. And you can even have that dynamic within family relationships where siblings are pitted against each other as children, and then they grow up kind of it's that icky energy, and they can be unforgiving of each other and never establish really deep relationships in adulthood. And then when parents die, the relationships don't even continue at all.
Yeah. One of the ways that I realized that I did have anxiety, or specifically OCD, is my tendency to hold grudges. And I had no idea that was connected to my OCD mindset, where it's just, you get so locked in that I cannot forgive. And all you see is the problem, that you don't see how that's impacting you. And what I realized is I'm hurting more by holding the grudge, and it's making me physically sick. And it's not worth it for me to hold on to that grudge anymore, and to learn to release it and move on. And it was the greatest, I think. It was a total freedom moment for me, just realizing that and realizing I need to let that go because it's making me sick.
Right. And you didn't lose your identity by letting it go. No. In fact, we can find more of who we are when we let it go.
It expanded my life in so many ways. And so this is one thing that a lot of people feel like I learned the word hubris in high school, and I was like, wow, what I'm doing right now is this false sense of importance. Like I'm empowered and I'm in control because I'm the one holding the grudge. Yeah. And I think a lot of people feel that way when really you're not. You feel you're doing it out of fear and weakness. And you feel so much stronger by being the one to forgive, by being the one to move forward, by being the one to reconnect and move on.
And you won't know that until you do it. Yeah. It's not something you see through and go, oh, I see that I'm going to feel better when I do this. Nope. You have to literally do it. And when we hold on to these things, it will often manifest as illness when we get older.
But I also want to say that it's one of the hardest things to do, because every bone in my body is telling me not to do it. And I'm feeling this false sense of importance, but I have to still fight through that and still do it.
You have to, when it comes to forgiveness, you have to trust people like you and I saying there's another side. You have to trust us.
Yeah.
That the perception in which the lens through which you're seeing is distorted. So you have to trust somebody that's been through it to go through it. Otherwise, you won't do it.
And it's not only distorted, but you have this tunnel vision that you're not seeing the big picture. You're
That's
only
right.
seeing the little problem and not seeing the big picture, so you're not finding the solution. And you're right, you have to trust somebody that's telling you that there is the other side of it, and it's so much better than where you are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Wow.
It's really true.
I can imagine it being very scary as a child to see your imaginary friends. Or were these like, again, the spirits that you saw, like the father coming in full form, or were they something different that were coming to you to wake you up to tell you to go tell the neighbor?
No, they were coming in full form. They would come in, like I would see them in normal life. Mm-hmm.
So
mostly it's because in that era, it would be somebody had unresolved things with somebody, and it was a phone book time. So turn to page 200 in the phone book, or turn to the T's and go to page 5 of the T's and this number. And there's just no way. And I was so timid and so shy. I'm going to pick up the phone to call somebody that doesn't know me. But it was things like that. But this is what's interesting. I had who I thought was an imaginary friend. And this woman I thought was American Indian. I thought it was an Indian in her life. And she would come to me at night when I would be awake, frightened. And she would create, again, a diorama like this, like she had a family, a daughter and a son and a husband and a teepee and a fire. And then she would sing to me around the fire to put me to sleep. But you see, she created a very safe environment. And that happened for years. And then in this time period of when my last child was born, and I was really struggling with not feeling good, blaming myself that I didn't feel good because I didn't even know the word depressed. I didn't have language for how I felt. And so I really thought I was just sick, that I lacked the ability to generate energy is really what I thought. And I was in my backyard and I hear this voice saying, "Lisa, it's me," but I didn't see anything. And I said, "I know your voice. You were my friend as a child." And I said, "Tell me your name." And she said, "Ask your father." Okay, well, my mother had died when I was in my early 30s, and I did not want to talk to my dad about this. And she said, "I want you to know my name, and your dad knows my name." Okay, I get up my courage. I call my dad, and I said, "Dad, this is the deal." And he responded with so much love. He goes, "Lisa, I know who that is. Her name is Ethel." I said, "Ethel, why do you know her name, Dad?" And he goes, "She was an Indian, but not an American Indian. She's a Tlingit Indian from Alaska. And she was married to your grandfather and died in the epidemic, the influenza. And they had only been married a few months. And she lifted from her body when your grandfather was holding her. And as she left, I learned my father had the same gift as me right then. See? 2, she turned around and said, "Oren, I will wait for you." Okay. Now I find out for the first time in my life that my grandmother wasn't really my grandmother, who I knew wasn't. Or let me say this differently. I found out a lot of things at one time. But you see, go back to Quaker, I had to ask the question to find out. And I said, "Why didn't you tell me this, Dad?" And he said, "Well, you didn't ask." Oh, okay. So this woman, Ethel, is still in my life. And it's not that I forgot her, but her role changed in a sense. And if she had had children, my father would have been her son. So she took me on, right, as if I was her blood relative, and protected me, guided me, taught me in a child, helped me be able to go to sleep, right? Then I find out that my grandmother wasn't my grandmother. So in addition to this, my father's mother, who my grandfather married next, suffered from depression. and was put into a mental institution when he was 3 years old. And they cited something, but they ended up doing a lobotomy on her and all those things, so she never left. And it was probably postpartum depression, which I'm now quite well educated on, right? But they didn't know they didn't have language for it. But see, if I had known this, then I could have done it differently, but I didn't. And because of that, I was taught differently as well. And I was able to get help once I got this information at that time. But all of the family unraveling helped me understand who I was, in addition to who this childhood friend was of mine, and that I interpreted her skin correctly. She was an Indian, and the teepee correctly, but she was a Tlingit Indian from Alaska.
It just makes me so sad with the history of mental health and what we've done to women, especially in the lobotomies and the hospitalizations. So it makes me think about, how are we going to look back on how we've treated people with schizophrenia?
Right.
Because what you're describing, some people might say, well, Lisa, you had schizophrenia as a child.
You know what? And let's bring in religious connotation with that, culture with that. Is the Bible says that I'm a soothsayer. Well, I'm anything but that. So you follow me, like that, or I am, but not in the frame that it was described. I don't know. But we're taught in our cultures that this is wrong. And yet I was born this way. I didn't, and even if those that go to class to learn to become that, there's nothing wrong with that. These are gifts that help our life and can help people. So you're right. The names in which they're given is really detrimental.
So do you think there are some people that are diagnosed with schizophrenia and put on horrible medications, horrible treatments, are struggling with something that possibly maybe they were gifts and they just don't understand?
That's a gift. Mm-hmm. And I think when they turn into anger, so this is a hobby, right, of mine as I work with people, is I what's the word? Like I clock, might be the right word, like different things. So if someone is spiritually gifted and they go and do drugs, it can even be marijuana, all right? It can alter that. And what happens in that is, if they have this gift of being clairvoyant, clairaudient, the clairs, the drug can alter then the brain wiring. And so it becomes out of balance. Then what it does is it allows the negative voice in. Does that make sense? Right? Now, I also believe there's schizophrenia where there's the wiring that's really a mental loop that I think is really helpful for medication. So I think it kind of falls into two categories for me. Did it become out of balance? Did the gift become out of balance because of the substance? Yes, a lot of times it has. Does that mean it can't be corrected? It can be. Oftentimes, also, we're going deep fast here, doctor, and you're the expert. I'm not. I'm only telling you things that I've recognized through the work I've done. But also what I've noticed is how they eat impacts a lot for schizophrenia. So the food that they eat, or what they're depleted in, are they depleted in those core elements and minerals? Well, that just adds to this mental looping. But often, right, they're trying to balance themselves, and so then having to focus on what they eat isn't it's so hard. It's too hard for them because they're managing the negative voices in the schizophrenia.
Well, one thing that I've learned is, people might not believe in this, but I do believe in demonic possessions, and but it happens when you're weak. It happens when you're weak and your guard is down and you can't defend yourself. Mm-hmm. Is that what you mean by the voices are going in?
Yeah, when the voices are coming in. I think of it as, and those demonic things can happen during drug use because our energy system is now open. When we give our power away to a drug, and it can be excessive alcohol, those that or whatever is excessive, out of balance. But I also can, like the people in the park, right, that are schizophrenic and they're batting at these things. They're real. I have great empathy for them. they're very real in their life. And it's not just because they're schizophrenic, it's because of different things that have happened. And those spirits that they're batting, or those voices they're trying to get away, they're real for them. They're very real. Mm-hmm. And if the veil was lifted, we would see spirits pestering them.
But again, it's because they're depleted, they're mentally weak, their guard is down, they don't have any defenses to protect themselves against it. And I know that we have a lot of protection prayers and things that we do to kind of protect ourselves against that. But some people don't have those defenses. And I had a patient tell me when she was really young, she was very sick in bed. She had a fever, and she saw this demon trying to come into her body. And her dad ended up experiencing the same thing. And she described it in a way that culturally, it's exactly what I grew up knowing about them. And I was like, oh, wow, I had no idea that that's something that can happen. But it is because we're mentally weak. And I always use this little guy as my anxiety. He's the same way. Like when we're depleted, when we're exhausted, when we're tired, we're not defending ourselves against all the intrusive thoughts, all the negative thinking. And so we can definitely calm this guy down and we can train him to work for us. But he gets really loud and obnoxious when we're not feeling in control. And then he becomes in control of us. So that's one way of looking at it, but it could be bigger than it could be spirits, it could be demons, it could be other things.
That's right.
Trying to take over.
Yeah, it's a great analogy.
Wow. It just makes you think about, like, just even there's epigenetics, but there's also frequencies, there's also energy, the fact that we're only able to see certain things. You happen to have a gift that you can see more than we can, where for us, there's a lot that's happening behind the veil that we don't have access to.
That's right. And actually, when I've had people come to me and say, okay, can you clear the blocks so that I can see dead people? I'm like, you don't really know what you're asking with that. Like, if we were supposed to, like everybody, then we would have that. But it's very confusing to the brain. It impacts us in a way that we're not wired to be that way as a whole. And so it's a gift that we're not, that people don't see that, because if they're still earthbound, they shouldn't be here. And there's all those sorts of reasons why they're earthbound. You need to move on in your life. So you can really get hung up in that space that I don't think really moves the needle forward a lot, if that makes sense. I don't know. I mean, I have found it to be useful, but man, I suffered for a long time.
If we're not trained, if we're not prepared, it can really make us become severely mentally ill. But right now, I know a lot of people are wearing like the Wi-Fi hats or the EMF hats and the blankets to protect themselves against EMFs. But culturally and religiously, there are a lot of countries where the women and the men both protect their heads. They always wear something over their head. What do you think is the reason for that? Do you think it's to protect us from things entering or from things escaping? Like, what is the reason?
It could be both, right? And I also think we're not all wired the same. So even if we have an open crown chakra, which I do in this is all open, right? And there's different, there's astrology, there's human design that'll tell us things like this, and that then we receive information from the collective, so to speak. We receive information. And also then that means that how our thoughts, maybe our thoughts are also heard in a sense. And so maybe doing that would protect that. I also think there's this element of what we believe is the reality. And so if somebody is a true empath and they know it, and so that means being out in the world is hard for them, and they wear these EMF beanies, I say, I empower them to do it, because if the subconscious, conscious mind believes that this is going to help, it will help.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, one of the other reasons that I wanted to talk to you today is you also specialize in financial blockages that people have, right? Again, it's you inherit that from your great-great-grandparents or whatever. Yeah. So can you talk a little bit about how the ancestral beliefs can impact our ability to be successful in this world, or our financial ability to attract money into our lives?
Right. That's a great question. And there's several elements to it. So if you think about life as a tapestry, there's these threads of truth that come through. And unfortunately, if we are anchored to that one truth in the thread, then it impacts how we show up in the rest of our life. So I'll share a quick story with you about a client that I had who was ready to just sell her business. She would get engaged, break off the engagement. She had 2 employees. They always were threatening to quit. Why? Because this woman couldn't make a decision. They would come to her with ideas, and she never took the ideas. She was just so impacted by the fear of making decisions in her business. This is what we found, okay? 2 generations back, her great-grandfather at the time was in the Great Depression, very successful man. And he had manufacturing plants, but he also had an addiction to gambling. And so what happened is he had lost everything but his last manufacturing plant. And the roll of a dice, he loses it. So this family that was extremely wealthy during a time where there was very little wealth lost everything. And so how she interpreted that in her body and what she inherited, that every decision she makes is a gamble. She's going to lose it all with the wrong decision. Cleared that pattern, all right? And she ended up actually doubling her business within the year, hired 2 or 3 more people. The people she had stayed. She ended up saying yes the second time or the third time, whatever it was, in her engagement, got married. And so what used to be hard, this is the takeaway, what used to be hard around money doesn't have to stay hard. And I really believe that good people do good things with money. I've worked with people where they had an ancestor, I call it the Batman syndrome, because one of the ancestors actually died due to wealth, were killed from an unexpected burglary that went bad, right? And then the fear is you're not safe if people know that you have money. So therefore, what do? You drive an old Honda from, whenever, because you don't want anybody to know. The other thing I found out a lot in this work that lives within us, but we're not literally aware of. Now, we might have been told as a child that money doesn't grow on trees. There's actually an old saying that some of your audience might recognize is, you were born on the other side of the tracks, or they were born on the other side of the tracks. We don't use that analogy so much now at all, if at all, but those before us sure did. Because the tracks that came through the city determined on which side was wealthy and which side was not wealthy by the train tracks. So that can get passed down that, that's available for other people, but not for me. Right? And so these things that we've heard, these things that were experienced before impact the ceiling, right, about how much money, or it makes it difficult to charge our worth because something is better than nothing. Or we were taught that you need to take that job and be grateful for it. So we might have had a parent that worked in a job that they hated, but it was because they were putting food on our table as kids.
Definitely. I mean, we don't even realize how much our thoughts can limit us. And for me, I know what anxiety held me back, like as far as the types of jobs I applied for. I didn't want a lot of attention on me. Money was never my motivating reason for doing anything. But I can make that connection. But for some other people, like you said, they have no idea that it can go back to grandparents or the Depression era. That's very easy because that was less than 100 years ago.
That's right.
And a lot of those people just pass those skills on, or those, not skills, but the mentality down to generations afterwards.
And it can show up in our money. It can show up in our health, not taking care of ourselves or not wanting to spend money on our body, going to the doctor. It can show up around the weight we carry, because if we're afraid of starving, we're going to eat a lot because it could be our last meal in a sense, without really being consciously aware that that's what you're doing.
Do you believe in things like the evil eye, or people just kind of doing dark magic on you and having that kind of an impact?
I believe that there are people that do voodoo, that those things are very real. But I don't believe that they have to impact us. They can be cleared. Anything that's been put on us can be cleared. We don't have to own that. I don't study that stuff at all. I acknowledge that it's out there, but I don't dabble in it at all. Mm-hmm.
I think with social media, like a lot of people say, don't tell people your dreams, don't show off about your relationship, don't show off about your wealth, because on social media, the negative reaction of people can impact and can send that negative energy to kind of destroy our life in different ways. Do you believe
but that's giving our power away to the unknown. That's giving our power away to people we don't even know. Right. And that's disempowering. So I would say clear that pattern, so to speak, of being afraid of other people impacting in the negative. And because we can create that energy shield, our aura, and be stronger than that, knowing that our belief system is stronger than theirs. Now, we could go into another conversation where people's negative thoughts about us impact us, which is kind of what you're saying. I think social media is one aspect, but what about our best friend, or what about our family member that when we share something exciting about, we're going to do something, and they go, oh yeah, but what about this and what about that? And we're held back because of their belief that we might be in danger doing something. That impacts us as well.
But it's the law of attraction, right? Like if I'm my sister has anxiety, and so if I'm driving too fast, like, oh my God, you're going to get a ticket. I was why would you put that in my head right now? Because now I'm going to attract that ticket.
That's right. But again, let me share something that I created a while ago, trademarked it. I teach a class around it, but I want to give it to you and your audience to use, because it's so powerful. We get stuck in our neural pathways, really at no fault of our own. And your sister in this state is trying to be protective and say, I love you, sister, in this roundabout negative way. It's trying, it gives her relevance, and we all need relevance. So it gives her something. It puts an impression on you that you fear now is going to have a negative impact. Like, oh, great. Now I'm aware to all policemen because you just said that. Mm-hmm. This is what you do. And I use it for negative thoughts. We could talk about lots of different ways to use this, but here we go. Cancel, only love is spoken here. And what this is a pattern disrupt. And it says to the body, it doesn't say stop talking this way. You're not saying, okay, stop, sister, talking to me this way. You're going to say in your mind, cancel, only love is spoken here. That was not a positive thought. That thought was not love. I'm not owning it. Now, what if we're in our own life and we keep getting these negative repeating thoughts? You might say this phrase 500 times until all of a sudden you realize, oh, wait a minute, I don't even think that way anymore. That's how powerful it is. It helps rewire the brain. Cancel, only love is spoken here.
I love that. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And it's about reminding ourselves. And like you said, I am giving my power away when I'm not aware of creating that shield.
That's
but
right.
We have to actively create a shield. Otherwise, we are open to a lot of things coming our way, and we have to be more mindful and do things like cancel, or have protection prayers, or there's even Qigong energy that we can.
That's right. Move it away. That's right. It's creating the tools that make us feel safe, to operate authentically in who we are, with who we are.
Instead of just passively existing in the world and allowing everything just come at us. I mean, if we go out into the rain and we see that it's raining, we're going to put up an umbrella.
That's
and if we know that the world is like that, where we can attract everything, we need to create ways, or be aware of it and create ways to protect ourselves. Wow. What an amazing conversation this was.
I know, a good conversation. So good.
It is good. Your story is inspirational. Like, it's amazing that you had to survive that as a child, and your mom was trying to protect you, and God was trying to prepare you. And somehow, with all of that, here you are. And finally, it's all coming to fruition, I guess.
Yeah. And then I get to meet you and see if I hadn't said yes to that. There's this importance of saying yes to who we are, which is like saying yes to forgiving. yes to these different things in our life so that we can experience, and through experiences, we let go of struggle and we let go of old identities, because really what got us here isn't going to get us forward. And so by looking at, and especially right now in the era that we're living in, really letting go of these stories, these paradigms, this looping that we get into, and what is anxiety really trying to say to you, right? Unraveling that, which is the gift you give people in the work you do.
And I can also see anxiety and OCD being my biggest gift and my biggest blessing, because it has helped me in so many ways. And I know you and I work with high achieving women, and a lot of these high achieving women, if they only realize that they don't have to allow that to be their fuel, and they can actually, or they're allowing fear to control them and allowing it to be their fuel instead. But that could be another conversation. But it is something that when you realize how to work it or understand it better and not fight it so much, and remember, you can do hard things, and everything that you want is outside your comfort zone. Get out of it, expand your comfort zone, do things that you're afraid of. You never know what the good things that can come out of it.
So many good things. We're not victim to the world around us, but if we live in a victim mindset, then we don't take ownership of who we are. Yeah. And I really have a belief that we chose the struggles we were going to get. We wanted to experience Earth a certain way, so that we could become different than how we arrived. And so when we own that sense of, oh, I signed up for this. Okay, I might not be experiencing it how I thought it would be, but nonetheless, that means I have within me to move through it. I have it within me, or God wouldn't have allowed it to happen. I don't believe we are ever given more than we can handle.
It's true. It's true. Yeah. But it's the same thing as me saying, I want to get my doctorate in psychology. That was not an easy path. That was a lot of studying, a lot of struggle. I could have given up at any point and said, I can't do this anymore. Right. But the goal of becoming a psychologist was so important to me that I chose to go through that hardship. And it's the same thing as with whatever we want, but we don't like the struggle part of it. We just want what we pray for or what we dream about.
That's right. And it could be, and your accomplishment is a huge feat. I mean, like, become a doctorate, get your PhD is an undertaking for this, only those that have that strength. You can't do it otherwise. And we could apply it the same way to somebody that has a fear of public speaking. If you don't move through it, then you don't know the capacity you have to impact audiences. So we have to move through these uncomfortabilities at any stage, no matter how small it is or how big it is. Like becoming a doctorate, getting your PhD is a big feat.
I think no matter what you want, you're going to have to go through the training process to become the thing that you want. And that's going to be difficult. You have to stick with it.
You do.
Where can people find you and connect with you?
I would love a follow on Instagram. So Lisa Thomas Global is my handle for Instagram. And it's the same for my website. Lisa Thomas Global will get you to my website. And I respond to all emails and all my own DMs.
And I will connect all of that to your show notes and make sure that people follow you, because your story is incredible. Thank you so much for having this conversation with me and being here.
Thank you for asking me. I'm so glad it all worked.
It did work. And the reason I found you on another summit and I listened to you. Wow, I need to hear this woman. I need to have her on my podcast. And you were so generous when I DM'd you. You did respond. So thank you.
You're welcome. Good luck with your work and reach back out anytime.
Thank you so much. Thanks for listening. Be sure to follow and subscribe to the Mental Health Break podcast. It would really help us get discovered by others if you do. And now you can text us directly and share your thoughts with us about this episode. Until next time.